Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, today I got to run session 5 of what we're now starting to call Witch Island, Escape from Witch Island, where I'm playing with these kids at this library. I've been running the game for a while now, and last session was a little bit rough because there was some tension between the actual players. This session was a little bit better, although there were still some moments of indecision, or I want to go this way, I want to go that way. Let's see what happens. But overall, the session went really, really well. I want to talk about some of the aids I've made myself for the game a little bit. Here's a great aid right here. This incredibly well-drawn map, including the word lagoon spelled wrong, which I thought was great because I had to kind of recap with the kids, where are we all, at this point? And so, one group went left, one group went right, one group went straight, and a whole bunch of people, mostly the sailors and whatnot that they brought with them, stayed on the beach near the lagoon. The lagoon. We got a great, laugh out of that. And I've been using the same features I'm using when I'm playing Astonishing Swordsman and Sorcerers of Hyperborea, where I kind of take a picture with my phone of whatever I want to show them, little map or anything like that, and just to shoot it, airdrop it to the iPad, which I'm actually using, which is what I'm using to record this right now, or what I would be using to run Zoom, and then sharing that content. So that's worked out pretty decent. So if I want to share something with the kids, it's pretty easy to do. It's pretty fast. I could take a picture with the iPad too, but then I have to lift it up, and it's very cumbersome, and hilarity ensues, all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of where they started. Unfortunately, the sixth kid who's been having issues with his audio and just kind of like vanishes for a lot of the sessions and doesn't put his screen on, so very often we're not really sure if he's there or not. He was there in the beginning, and then it seemed he said he had some audio problems, which is why he was kind of absent the whole time last time. But sure enough, it kind of happened again. I'm not really sure exactly what happened, but it is what it is. We did have to spend a little bit of time in the beginning. I had to make sure that everybody was coming. And it turned out that two of the kids, they just plain old forgot. So I kind of emailed their mom, and it was really kind of cool. She said, "Oh, we forgot." And the kids showed up, and it was great because we hadn't started yet, which is cool because we kind of left these guys at a little bit of a cliffhanger. We've got one guy, Brorn, he's sitting there like meeting a pseudo dragon. We've got these two people here. Well, they're meeting an Enkeg, which is not going quite as well because the last thing that happened was it spit a bunch of acid. I think they both made their saves, but they were in a world of trouble. And we've got these people here going to the village of the Frogmen. They're bullywugs, but I'm just calling them the Frogmen. And so people that were might have been missing were really important. So it was good that they actually showed up. Is what I'm trying to say. It's been a long day, kids. And anyhow, I kind of asked the other kid, well, where do you want to be? Here's the situation. He's like, I really have no idea. And then by the time we had gotten everything else ready to go, he'd sort of vanished, unfortunately, which was too bad. I actually kind of agonized a little bit, like over agonized. What do I do about XP last time? Because he was present for one combat and wasn't present for another combat. And at the end of the day, I could have given him 67 XP and everybody else 230. And I was like, I just gave everybody 200 XP. He still didn't level up. I'm trying to do something that's going to be fair, but not, it's hard to know where to figure out, like, where do I draw the line here? I'm not like I need to punish the kid for something like that. That's silly. But you get the idea. What do I do? But okay, I think I made the right judgment call. We'll see what I do this week, as far as that's concerned. That's really kind of a very minor thing, and it's one of those parts of wrangling a group like that, which might be it's a little different than like normal tabletop play, and it's also different because heck, I'm being this is a subcontracting sort of job for me at this point, where I'm working for the library, and these are just citizens, paying citizens that just kind of show up, and so I'm putting out service for them. So a little bit different than your normal game. But I decided I needed some help because oftentimes I'm looking up information, and very often the kids aren't able to look up as much of the information as I'd like them to. I think I'm slowly sort of getting them to understand everything about what's going on in the character sheets, but I'm still getting a lot of questions. Like when it's time to attack, well, what do I add to that? And I try to be really specific. I just got to do a lot more repetition. I sent them some digital copies of the character sheets as we went along, but I think I'm going to have to do it. Again and like update some of the stuff so they can kind of see what I'm talking about in terms of, well, you're just adding, your proficiency, bonus and your strength bonus here and the not there and all that other kind of stuff. So I decided, well, let me make my life a little easier, and so I made this little cheat sheet here with the characters and what their armor class and the hit points and the current hit points they might have, and what their melee attack bonuses are, as far as to hit and damage, and then range, any kind of other thing. Like we have one of our rangers attacks with a finesse weapon, usually for melee. If he doesn't, he has like a strength of 8, so it's very, very different than his dexterity of, I think it might be 17 or something like that. And if they have any kind of like extra things, like the sneak attacks and what have you, and what the criteria are, what kind of damage they're doing, they're getting up to 3rd level now, which is kind of cool. They're starting to come into their own. And I kind of told them, like, listen, like at this point, our updates of your characters, which are going to take a chunk of time, this is going to start happening less, as far as I can tell, based upon the XP, because it takes a lot more XP to get to 4th level and to 5th level. And it seems like a lot of the way that 5th edition is designed is to kind of get you out of that 1st through 2nd, at least, maybe even 1st through 3rd, in a hurry. Get you out of the squish zone and get you someplace where the character starts feeling like they might survive. They're starting to feel more like the idea you had in your head about what this class might be like. So any kind of other stuff, and one kid has a breath weapon. So what does that do? What's the save for that particular thing? Well, it depends on his DC, and we've got our druid who can wild shape into stuff, and because he's a moon druid, member of the moon circle, he can wild shape into animals that can do a lot of damage. So I've these stats here for his brown bear and his dire wolf thing that he likes to change into so far. It really helps. And I probably don't have enough information on here because there's a lot of spell stuff where I need a little bit more like spell DCs and whatnot. So let's talk a little bit about making their improvements too, because that was kind of interesting. As I'm examining and learning 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons in all its grimy detail, this is part of what's helping me learn it, is like helping these kids level up and make some decisions and what have you. So we had 2 rangers that leveled up, and so they have to make this decision now, like, well, what kind of ranger are you going to be? Are you going to be a beastmaster, or are you going to be a hunter? And it was one of those things where I noticed there was a, this should really be, I should really be talking about this in my Ivan Examines D&D videos. I'm looking over here and I know what this one player is going to want. She's going to want the Beastmaster. She's going to want the Beastmaster for flavor. I'm looking at what the Beastmaster actually gives you, what the limitations of that actually are. And I'm especially at the level they're at right now, because very often what I've noticed is, the really cool stuff, the stuff that feels like what the name suggests of something like Beastmaster, doesn't really show up until a lot later. But what about now? And as opposed to the hunter, really what you're choosing is between 3 different types of attacks. And kind of looking at those and seeing which one might be better or not better, whatnot. Both of them kind of wanted to be Beastmasters. The girl went with it because, and I'll see how it happens. She can't really sure. She's not really sure which one of her pets she wants to have become the actual beast. And I told her, listen, we can make your owl a lot cooler than he is, and he can be this great horned, really big owl. Or one of your cats could be like a Maine Coon, and we give her the panther stats. I really don't care. It's it's an animal she already kind of has. She can't decide which one she wants yet. So we haven't actually used that at this point. Although she did try to grab something else. She did try to grab the pseudo-dragon that the other guy brings to camp. The conversation with the pseudo-dragon actually went very, very well. And I kind of played a little fast and loose with the fact that they can't really speak even in complete sentences psychically. But it did a lot of, like, well, here's the pictures he's giving you. You can kind of understand that he's from this particular place, and he belonged to this sea captain, and they got attacked by pirates years ago, and he's been stuck on this island. And it turns out this rogue that the kid's playing has the highest charisma of the entire party. He was nice to it. It likes him. The ranger doesn't really particularly have a great charisma. And, she wanted to see if I could make this my guy, and the pseudo-dragon just wasn't having it. I thought that was kind of fun. So this kid's got a pseudo-dragon for pretty much for nothing. Because, hey, why not? So she hasn't figured out what she wants to do with her Beastmaster yet. And the other kid finally chose the Colossus Slayer. The idea, once they're damaged, we roll another D8. He's like, I'm not really sure, but once we actually started playing, and he's rolling against the Ankeg, and later on, there he's involved in a fight against something else, and it's already taken some damage, and he rolls a critical, and he's rolling 4d8, plus the bonus. He was like, oh yeah, well this is really cool. I'm really kind of digging this now. So we had to go to one of those fun moments. And the other young man, who always looks like, there as I sit on the bench, and he always kind of reminds me of the kid from the Foghorn Leghorn videos. Really, really smart kid. Playing the rogue, and it's time for him to choose. Well, what kind of rogue do you want to be? And once again, I'm looking there before I talk to him, so I'm prepared, to answer any questions. And I'm looking at the 3 things you can be. They can be the classic thief or the classic assassin, or the arcane trickster, the guy that's also a wizard. And I'm looking at what happens. Once again, I really need to save this for my other series of videos. And I'm like, wow, thief, assassin. And I'm like, well, I'd kind of vote for the Arcane Trickster. We don't have a wizard in the party anyway. And I mentioned this to the kid, and the fact that he's got the special version of Mage Hand, and he's like, I love Mage Hand. I want to do that. It's like, cool, but he hasn't had the time to really figure out what he wants to do for spells, and he doesn't have a player's handbook in his house too. So I'm gonna have to help him out and do a little bit more of the work. So I've got another set of spells to kind of to deal with here and help the kids with, and that's been a bit of a challenge. It's harder because we're not meeting in person. It's not something where like I've sent them the version of these files, which I believe their parents had printed out for them. But it's a lot of information. This is a game they're playing once a week, and this is they're doing a lot of other stuff. So pretty much, I've literally got this much stuff for one kid that's the cleric, because all these spells are available to him. He picked the cantrips that he wanted, so he doesn't know the other cantrips, but he knows every other second level spell and a first level spell. He's just, and some of them he automatically prepares, some of them he doesn't automatically prepare. Then we got this other kid that's a druid, and he's got just a buttload of spells here, that I kind of printed out and everything. And I was able to do that via a few different means. I was able to cut and paste some from the digital version, which I'm not sure if it's official or not, of the player's handbook. I think it might not be, but that comes out with all these really bizarre symbols and wingdings. So it's easier to find stuff like that on the internet and yank it. And it can be interesting. There's a lot of free SRD stuff out there I can find. I have to make sure it matches, and then there's some spells that aren't there, so I have to type it out, the same thing. It's not a big deal. I was thinking to myself today, there's good and bad about being able to yank stuff off the internet in terms of the monsters that is available, because a whole bunch of monsters I kind of like put in a little thing. What kind of monsters are on which island, so I don't have to keep on flipping through the monster manual and stuff. Little cut and paste. I can find most of them on some sites, but some of them I had to take off other sites. So you're going to find a spectator on which island, so I had to get that off a different site, so the format is completely different. It's very convenient to be able to do that, to give yourself a reference document. This way, for monsters or for spells, that's cool. However, I've noticed that the spells, like, say, for example, spells I had to type in because they did not exist in any kind of SRD, I could just yank them off. Some of the really cool spells for the Warlock, by the way, which is an NPC. And I'll talk about the Warlock some other time as well. It was fun to make one as an NPC, I'll tell you that part. Doing that and actually typing stuff out, I learned it. It's one of those, and cutting and pasting, not writing stuff out, you don't learn it as well, because you're just kind of looking at it for a second. And so my handwriting is atrocious, and I remember like writing stuff as a kid, putting, and I learned the stuff, but it took forever. This is very neat to be able to just cut and paste stuff, but the downside is you don't internalize it as much. And so I understand might not be able to remember the so-and-so arms or the whatnot, the two spells that the Warlock has that I had to write down. They both begin with A, but I know what they do because I wrote it down. They're both pretty awesome and badass, but it's an NPC. So anyhow, my point is, where was I going with all this? Making this video much too long. It's that there's a lot of information that I have to kind of juggle here that the kids are having a hard time with, and part of what I told them was, until you understand what these spells are, I'm not going to make you prepare certain spells until you get a feel for like what these cleric spells can do, what these druid spells can do, which ones you like, which ones you want to cast more often, which ones you find the most useful. I'm going to play a little fast and loose with the preparation at first until they get the hang of it. But it's very difficult to teach lately. I had a discussion with them, a little bit in the beginning today, but I didn't want to take up too much time. I'm like, hey, we really need to start thinking about your spells, because at this point you can cast 6 a day. You've got these cantrips, and you kind of both know like 1 or 2 cantrips that you tend to use occasionally, but even then they're kind of underusing them. There's a whole lot more to your character. And it's something that they're going to have to learn by doing, and it's a bit tough to teach when you're not in person. So that's something that I'm still having to navigate in terms of like, being able to tell them, well, hey, this might be a good time to cast this. And I've done that in the past, but there's a lot more. And so the point is, as I'm trying to help them learn it, as I'm like sending them some information, guess who has to have this available at the table all the time? To say, I wonder what might be good here, so I'm kind of juggling those balls. And I have this table full of all this stuff, and I'm trying, despite the fact that this helps, making these play aids is great. They're also just a bunch of stuff on the table now. And I even had to make myself a little initiative tracker, which I may have misplaced already, which helps because very often I'm looking to see, where the, here we go. So very useful. Just making yourself a little initiative tracker, going from like the 25 to like -1 seemed to be like where that might actually happen, and so that helped because it would beat me writing stuff down because I was doing that and that was stupid. So I'm glad I took the 2 seconds to make myself this little initiative tracker as well. Wow, that's a lot of stuff I just talked about, but having those aids really, really helps because I have their character sheets too in front of me, but it's a lot to kind of juggle and navigate through all those kind of things at the same time. And of course, every session I have my little document of like not what's going to happen, but where are they? What's the scenario right now? So what actually did happen? Because that was a lot of me talking about just the stuff that I use as play aids and preparation, which is relevant to this whole topic, to be honest with you. I mean, because I'm kind of learning how to I'm learning the game, learning 5th edition, Dungeons and Dragons. I'm learning how to run the game for children in a teaching manner. I'm learning how to run the game for children on Zoom, with the parameters of this is a library group, not it's not something I can opt out of or say, well, hey, I don't think we're meshing, or whatever happens to be. And I know how to make play aids, but it's just figuring out like through trial and error which ones do I actually need, what am I actually looking up, what am I fumbling over, not knowing this young person's AC or realizing that they're not going to be a reliable source of information when it comes to what's their 2-hit bonus or what's their damage bonus or what that sort of thing because they're learning it themselves. So having things like this really invaluable. Glad I had it today because I reference it like all day long. So what actually happened today? They were already split up. They talked to the frogmen. They have a disgusting meal. I was thinking of the second Indiana Jones, movie where they just have they're in this glen with all these frogs and frog people and giant frogs, and they bring out these big banana type leaf type things, and of course they've got like raw snails, live snails, and slugs, and the frogs are enjoying this big feast. And there's the big guy that kind of looks like Jar Jar Binks or like Boss Nass, but buff too, and he's wearing all this gold and what have you, and. So I'm juggling between that scene and then the other young man talking to the pseudo-dragon to the point where they're kind of bonding a little bit, and the other two having their fight with the Ankeg, which they defeated quite handily. I was really surprised because we had 2 third-level rangers at that point, and the Ankeg made a good showing in the beginning, but they really took it out pretty fast. And I used the full hit points for the thing and what have you, so I was like, wow, because I'm used to Ankeg being like a holy crap dude. They were freaked out by it, by the description, and then I, flashed a picture a couple times, didn't tell them what it was. But it was a fun combat. But they really kind of went, all out. And a lot of what's happened today, and a thing I'm still trying to learn how to navigate with this group of kids, is there's a lot of premature imagination going on, where they're telling you exactly what they're going to do, and I'm going to stab it here, and shoot it in the eye, and all that kind of stuff. And I want to encourage the really creative narration because of the one kid playing the Dragonborn Ranger in particular, really, really good at this, like, awesome creative narration. This is how I do this, and what have you. And when he rolled the critical, I just said, well, how do you kill this guy? And it was awesome. How he described everything. So I was like definitely like, that's really awesome. Adults haven't done any better than what this kid just described in lurid detail. But I'm having to figure out how to navigate that for a couple reasons. There's a point where they already told me that they don't like the unrealistic description where people just keep getting hit and they have arrows sticking in their head and whatnot and they aren't dying. And I'm kind of trying to reinforce the mojo, what are hit points really? And a lot of it is the sort of luck and what have you, because that's what the game tells you. And at the same time, not wanting to discourage that up front, like this is what I would like to do. Trying to fit in narration of like, yeah, you actually do maybe stab it in the eye or whatnot, going along with like say maybe a lot of hit points of damage, trying to figure out when that actually happens, and wondering if that like with something like called shots, maybe I should have them do some of those at disadvantage, and where's the line with that with this particular system. How do I navigate that? Because sometimes disadvantage could be a big deal, and if you're shooting for something's eye and it's this big thing that has a pretty big head, I find it a little odd. It's a little unrealistic, dude, to say, well, you just miss it entirely because you're aiming for his eye. And all those arguments we've had with each other a million times. So I'm trying to figure out how to do that. But they kill the Ankeg. The kid brings the pseudo dragon back to the beach. The bullywugs, pretty much what they tell them is that we have other members of our tribe which are prisoners up in the area by the volcano. We can't go there because it's just not wet enough. It's uncomfortable for us. I hope they're doing okay with the lack of water, but there's lots and lots of gold there, and they're flashing all the baubles they have and what have you. And you go there, you get much gold and all that sort of stuff. The people decide to do that. The two characters that were there, the cleric and the druid, and the three guys they brought 3 red shirts with them, which I gave names to. And so they said, yeah, we'll do that. And of course, these bullywugs are totally lying to them. They have friends up there, but they just want the gold. And they're hoping that they can go up there, get the gold, bring them back, and if they actually bring stuff back, well, then they want to kill them because they value this. It's like kind of like a little trinket sort of thing to them. So I figured that'd be kind of fun. But it gave them like an idea of I was giving them like not a direction, but something like, well, you could do this. And I thought it'd be kind of neat to have those bullywugs there and maybe have them cause a bit of trouble later on. They meet back up. They compare notes. Okay, this is what we're going to do. The other thing that's happened is this one guy, Jonas, just an NPC. My name is Jonas, and he's disappeared. Where'd he go? And so they have a conundrum now. Do we go here and do what the bullywugs, say to do? Or do we try to sit there and see if we can find our missing crewman? Because Jonas just all of a sudden, I guess he went to the bathroom or something. He disappeared. Has anybody seen Jonas? They split up again. They have a disagreement. Which way do we want to go? All right, so 3 of them. This time the guy with the pseudo-dragon joins the cleric and the druid. They all go off in one direction with the 3 red shirts. The other 2, the 2 rangers that attacked the Ankeg before, well, they decided, I think we should go see if we can find this guy. So I said, all right, fine, go ahead and do that. I gave them an option to see if they could just vote and all go in one direction, but I finally said, you know what, go ahead. That's what you guys want to do. But it was kind of a teaching moment. And the teaching moment happened later on during combat when it was at a point where it really was difficult to switch back and forth. I tried to do that as much as possible. And one of the kids, I think, was like, man, when is it going to be our turn again? So, well, it's part of what happens sometimes when you split the party is sometimes it can get a little boring like that. I'm going to do my best, but I can't always flip back and forth. So there was that. But they ran into a bit of trouble. The group that decided to go towards the volcano, they had a flyby by a black dragon wormling. And it's something I put on the island. And it's not the only black dragon that's there. But something that flew by, it noticed them. It was somewhat interested. They had a fire there. They weren't really sure what to do. First, they wanted to shoot a volley of arrows at it. And 2, the little dragon is freaking out because this guy's a like bully and he toys with his prey. And before he kills it and all that stuff, he's freaking out. He's telling the drow rogue that he's imprinted on, who hasn't chosen his spells yet, so he could have cast some spells. So this is a bad deal. They don't know what to do. They finally, dragon swoops down, sniffing. They finally attack it. They almost kill it. It's got about 33 hit points. And of course the armor class, well, actually pretty decent armor class, but they almost kill it. Gets away. And this is one of those things where, the kids, I shoot it in the eye. Maybe it did get shot in the eye. I thought it was kind of, literally had like 1 hit point left and got away. Because I would have let them kill it if they just were that shy of killing it. So that was an interesting little encounter. The cleric decides, well, can I have a war horn? Well, yeah, you can have a war horn. So he blows it to wake everybody up because it was happening on his watch, which I thought was awesome. Back to the other 2. Well, it's not called Witch Island for nothing. When I decided that the thing was going to be called Witch Island, I said, well, the kids have decided to go to Witch Island. My daughter, who lives with me, 25-year-old daughter, who actually I had to buy a player's handbook for, says, well, what kind of witches are there on? I said, well, I'm not really sure there's going to be witches. She goes, they better have witches if it's going to be called Witch Island, Dad. So she gave me what for and told me what I needed to do. So yeah, there's witches on Witch Island. So sure enough, Jonas was abducted by a couple of the thralls of a sea hag. And I forget what the monster is called. It's in Volo's Guide to Monsters. It's some kind of sea something or other. Sea spawn. There you go, sea spawn. I decided those were pretty cool to use as thralls of the sea hag. And they had, taken him to give to the sea hag as, here, you find me something to eat. Men have sailed here. Bring me one to eat. See if they have any babies. So they are able to follow the tracks as rangers, and finally kind of peer in this cave. And sure enough, there's this. I don't just call her a hag, and I don't call them sea spawn, but I'm describing the scene where the guy's face down. He's clearly dead. She's pinching him. This will be good, but bring me a baby. And so they're freaking out like, man, what do we do? And they decide we can't just let this go on, let her eat our friends, so they shoot some arrows. And they're at a distance, where they can do that, but they can't engage with melee right away. The one kid remembers his Hail of Thorns thing, which works out really well, wounds the sea spawn and the sea hag. And then it's on. And the sea hag's not moving, the sea hag is just using gaze, and tries to frighten him, doesn't work. But as far as I read the rules, she can use that gaze every round as far as trying to the death stare. First time he saves, second time he doesn't save. This is after he really brutalizes one of the sea spawn. It was awesome. He had this great. He did a critical hit. He describes exactly how he kills it. She does another gaze, and I'm like, and you have 0 hit points. And he's like, what? And he's freaking. His eyes are like saucers. I said, don't worry, you're not gonna die, because this is one of those things we talked about. But yeah, drops like a stone, makes his first death saves, which is a big sigh of relief from him. And at that very moment, there's other sea spawn coming in from the back, and the young elf ranger, our young girl that wants to be a beastmaster. Well, she wounds one of them, but these things have 3 attacks each, and so they kind of beat her within an inch of her life. She's still got maybe 10 hit points left, but it's not looking really good. Looks like they're going to get captured, which will be kind of funny next week. I'm wondering, I don't want to say 100% they get captured. They might get captured. And the last thing she does is she goes full Boromir, because she's watched her brother already. And she goes, can I have a warhorn like that? You guys don't have warhorns, And so she starts blowing on the warhorn. Really smart, because somebody can hear that one. Everybody at the beach can hear that. Pretty smart. In the meantime, we go back to the other kids that are in the woods, and we made a warlock. And well, I have to talk about the warlock class, and Ivan examines D&D. But I wanted to put something there that was different, so I decided to put a warlock there. So I made a 4th level warlock. That's going to be another one of my witches, a former sailor. And one warlock that has the I think a pact with a fiend and all that stuff. So I had fun making the character, figuring out the spells, everything like that. Had to figure out a lot of strategy for this character based on how many spells the warlock can actually cast before they have to do a short rest. And what kind of deciding is let's take that familiar. So it's got a Quasit familiar, and the idea this thing has a tree house or tree houses, and it's 60 feet up. And figured, well, this warlock has got spider climb, so it can get up to a certain point on the trees if it wants to, but it's got a rope ladder, and it's going to lower down the rope ladder, but just 20 feet, and leave it hanging. The other 20 feet is going to be it's going to be on a hook in the air, so it's lowered down 40 feet. Maybe 20 feet off the ground is what I'm trying to say, because then it can spider climb down and go do what it wants to, etc. All that kind of stuff. But it can't be. It's safer in its lair. And of course, the lair is horrific, but it's made out of boats, and really cool looking on the outside with portholes and telescopes, and on the inside there's full maps and tables and great stuff. But the walls are just covered with all kinds of hieroglyphics and symbols and everything, and some of it in blood, and some of it in charcoal, and just really creepy and freaky. And there's jars everywhere full of the specimens, animals and whatnot. This person's crazy. They're not home. So what do the kids do? They could have. They decide, well, maybe we just leave it alone. They could burn the tree down. Next thing was a huge tree, huge trees. You don't really have anything. Even the spell you have, you can't really, ignite this tree on fire. It would take you weeks to get enough wood. And also, is there any reason you're passing by somebody's house and burning it down? Unless you guys are really psychopaths. They laughed. But they decide all of a sudden, well, their curiosity got the better of them. Because they could have just passed, and I would have used this warlock later, because the witches on Witch Island, they keep an eye on you and wondering what you're doing, because they can use you for their nefarious and failed purposes. I'm telling you, Witch Island's a bad place. They decide, no, we got to figure out how are we going to get it there. They talked about maybe having a pseudo dragon flying up, but Druid decides, I'm going to wild shape into a black bear, climb up there, and knock the rope ladder down. Everybody goes up. They knock. They can't. Nobody's there. They finally open the door, and they enter this empty house, or one of the buildings in this treehouse fort that this warlock has created. And just as the session's closing, they see a couple of jars, get knocked over. Of course, it's the invisible Quasit hiding there watching them, and knocks a couple things over as it's running to call the warlock until something is up, and there's trouble. And so we leave it there. So we're at this point where they split the party, and I don't know what's going to happen next session. I'm pretty sure the people with the sea hag are probably going to get taken prisoner. And that'll be interesting. What is the sea hag going to want? The sea hag is probably going to want a baby. What do hags want? They want babies. They want to make their own coven. They want kids. Give me a son. Well, a daughter. Give me a daughter. I'll make my own daughter. Just give me a baby. But on the other hand, I'm not really sure what's going to happen with the kids in the Warlock's lair, because Warlock's got some pretty, for a short period of time, the Warlock has a lot of stuff they can do. But it is kind of interesting they've decided to go up here, because my escape plan for the Warlock was spider climb. They can do that. They can get up these trees and hide from everybody else. So I'm not really sure. We'll see what the Warlock does. Maybe they'll kill the Warlock handily. Maybe they won't. But I'm really kind of curious to see what happens next week, as they are so far apart. It's a little unfortunate, because I have to juggle that kind of stuff. But at the same time, it's been a fun game, and definitely enjoying it. And hopefully, I'm giving the kids their bang for their buck. Hopefully, they're having a good time. I think they are, but we are kind of ironing the bugs out of using the mechanics, not letting things slow us down. And here we're dealing a little bit more with consensus building, and what happens when you don't build a consensus. And I'm going to try to get them back together as fast as possible. But right now they're in a world of hurt. And they're messing with the witches on Witch Island. All right, kids. I'll talk to you later.